there's really no such thing as a normal reaction to grief, because we all, process loss very differently. A load of different emotions that people will experience whenever they experience a bereavement. And not everybody will experience all of these emotions. And there are, numerous emotions that people might experience. But what tends to be common initially is that people might experience shock, as in disbelief that the person has died. And that might be greater or lesser depending if the person's been ill. So if someone's been ill for a long period of time, then it might be expected that the person's going to die. So that experience of shock might be less for some people. Whereas if it's something sudden, then they still will experience shock, but it may be slightly different. And then also there's the kind of disbelief that it's actually happened as well. And then sometimes people might experience, that they blame themselves. Is there anything I could have done differently? Or is there anything other people could have done differently? And there can be a sense of kind of low mood as people try to think about the loss of the person, the loss of someone they have loved who has died. And then also thinking about, how am I going to live without them? What's life going to be like without them? So there's lots of different kind of emotions that people experience. But also at times they might also feel quite happy remembering the lives that they've had together. So there's feeling that movement between feeling sad and then celebrating the life that the person had, until we try to think about that period of adjusting to life without them. So that can be, there's no timeline within that, as in that grief is not a defined process, that people move through different stages. And even years after someone's death, they can still experience those feelings of grief and as they remember the person. And it can also be difficult in terms of like specific events like birthdays and anniversaries and holidays and Christmases, particularly in the first few years when that person isn't there. So as I say, we would see grief really as a process that never really ends. But it may be that we learn to adjust to our lives without that person. But we're still kind of effectively, thinking about them and remembering them.
There's also things like physical feelings, nausea, sickness, fatigue. I think one can really, really underestimate the physical aspect of grief as opposed to the psychological. I think as psychologists we think of the emotional side, but it's a very, very physical, animalistic thing as well. And some people even experience perhaps hallucinations of the loved one, and people think that they're going mad, but actually that is also a normal process.
What do people do, or what could people do to help themselves through that process?
Rest, connect, rest, recognise the grief, and recognise that one grief also reactivates other griefs. Recognise re-grief, recognise it's okay to not be okay, and to seek help, appropriate help and connection. Find physical activity. Physical activity is really important. And don't feel alone. It's really important to connect. And I guess that's been the difficulty during COVID, is that's hampered people's ability to connect. And that it's okay to talk about your feelings. And I think for a lot of people with dementia, they are okay talking about their feelings. So I think that's an asset, and we need to listen and not be scared to hear about that.
There's no right or wrong way to grieve. And sometimes when someone has died, that people might have expectations about how they'll feel or what they should do. And I suppose it's anything that you do is okay. So we all have our unique ways of coping with things and dealing with things. So whatever is your coping mechanism, that's all right. And I guess it's for some people as well, is that if there's that delayed grief reaction, because some people don't react initially, and other people around them might be surprised that the person's not upset or is not crying. And that's okay, because we all have our own individual, unique, journey. And I suppose to what Polly said as well, is really try to get support from family and friends and people who are close. And because sometimes people who are supporting a person who is grieving think, well, maybe if we don't talk about the person, it might help them to feel better. Well, in some ways, that's the worst thing that you could do, because whenever someone has died, what we really need to do is we need to keep them in mind and keep talking about them and thinking about them. So really talking to friends and family, and as many friends and family as you can, about that person and about how you're feeling. That helps. But some people don't want to talk about how they're feeling, and that's okay. So I suppose, but if you are someone who wants to talk about how you're feeling, then continue to do that, because that's a good way of actually, you know, processing it by verbalizing how we're feeling and talking about the person. It's helping us work through that process of grieving.
It's no shoulds about it, because I know some people that just want to go in their cave and go, "Bleh, leave me alone." And I think one of the difficulties with grief is there feel to be a lot of shoulds in people, whether it's the church or the health service or your neighbour. Oh, you should be crying, or you shouldn't be crying, or you should forget the shoulds, I think, is one piece of advice.
Those stories almost make the person bigger, don't they? Because if someone close to me has died, I have my love for them and my experiences. And then when I hear that somebody else loved them differently and had a different experience, it almost makes them bigger in some way. So the more stories you hear about someone, it's just very comforting in a different way, because you see different sides of them after they died, because you hear about parts of their life that you didn't know existed. So for some people, rituals like, you know, going to the graveside are really important, and you'll have people who potentially would visit a grave every day or every week or every month or on anniversaries, but you've got other people who don't like to do that, and they don't associate a grave with the person. And so it's about saying that it's okay if that's not what you want to do. You don't have to do certain rituals if that's not the way that you think about that person you want to behave.